Have you ever wondered why life sometimes takes away the people around you, leaving you to walk alone? What if that emptiness you feel is not a curse but a hidden doorway to your greatest transformation? In daily life, when the noise of the outside world softens and we are left alone with our thoughts, an uncomfortable but revealing question sometimes appears. Why do some people live without friends? This is not just a social issue, but also has a deeper psychological and spiritual meaning. It is not only about the lack of company, but also about what this solitude shows about the inner world of the person. Carl Jung reminded us that what we see on the outside is always a reflection of our inner self. The absence of friendships is therefore not a simple coincidence, but a sign, a symbol, an expression of hidden processes that we often do not fully understand at first. Some people pull back because old wounds have left scars that cannot be seen. Others prefer to keep distance because they feel the outside world is too loud, restless, and chaotic. And there are still others who quietly search for another way of living, a path more authentic and closer to what really matters, even if that means stepping away from the crowd. When a person has no friends, it is not only a social condition, but also a window into the soul, a window that opens to show hidden wounds, deep longings, quiet fears, but also secret strengths that, with time, can turn into inner gifts. From a Jungian view, loneliness is never random. It is the voice of the unconscious asking us to look deeper and to notice in ourselves what we have ignored, repressed, or forgotten. Maybe, just maybe, the absence of relationships with others pushes us to create the most important relationship of all, the one we have with ourselves. The absence of friends does not mean that someone is unworthy of them or that they lack human qualities. Usually, there are roots much deeper in the unconscious. In Jung's psychology, childhood often lays the foundation. A child who is not truly seen or understood quickly begins to believe that their feelings are not valuable. Later, this child becomes an adult who stays silent, withdraws, and builds an invisible wall for protection. The experience of rejection can also be a strong influence. People who have faced exclusion, mockery, or abandonment often develop the habit of protecting themselves through isolation, so they will not be hurt again. It is as if the soul, fearing new pain, prefers the safety of solitude over the risk of human closeness. Sometimes the reason lies in a difference in the level of awareness. There are people whose inner world is so rich and deep that they cannot relate to shallow or surface conversations. They long for genuine and rare connections in a world that often feels ruled by the trivial and the unimportant. This is why the absence of friends should not be seen only as a social shortcoming. It is also the expression of inner struggles, old hurts, unspoken fears, but also of a very delicate sensitivity. Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from not having people around, but from being unable to share what is meaningful to you." So when we notice someone living without friends, we should look beyond the surface. Behind this outer emptiness, there often lies a rich and complex inner life, a mirror of invisible battles fought quietly. And many times what seems like a lack is in truth a deep call of the soul for a life that is more authentic and more conscious. The absence of friends is not only a social fact, but also a symbol deeply rooted in our inner life. Loneliness is not simply a random condition. It is a timeless image that follows a person on their journey towards self-knowledge. In many spiritual and mythological traditions, we see the figure of the hermit, the wise man or woman who steps away from the world to dive into the depths of the soul. This image appears in legends, myths, and even in the tarot, where the old man holding the lamp symbolizes the search for the inner light. It is not a coincidence that many people without friends experience something similar, even if they are not fully aware of it. Something within them leads them down the path of introspection, a path their soul quietly demands. Loneliness, when it is not chosen but forced, can feel like a heavy weight, like an empty space filled with unanswered questions. Yet when its symbolic meaning is understood, it becomes clear as an important step in the journey of individuation. A person who is not distracted by constant outside noise must face their own shadow, their hidden fears, their old wounds, but also their unused powers and potentials. The collective unconscious speaks to us through images and symbols, and loneliness is one of these symbols. It is a call to retreat, to silence, to encounter what cannot be heard in the endless noise of society. Just as the hero in ancient myths must pass through the desert, the cave, or the dark night before reaching their final goal, the modern human must often pass through loneliness as a form of initiation. Something that at first appears like failure in social life can, on a deeper level, be seen as a rite of passage. The psyche creates conditions in which the person is forced to look inward, even if they do not understand it or even accept it at first. It is as if the soul whispers, "Now is the time to listen to yourself before you can truly meet others." I remember when someone once said to me in a session, "Doctor, I have no friends. I feel so alone." What I saw was not only the absence of people in their life, but also the seed of a possible transformation. I saw the chance that this person, in the middle of their isolation, might discover sides of themselves they never would have noticed if they were always surrounded by company. When it is rightly understood, loneliness opens the doorway to authenticity and inner freedom. What may look like weakness to the outside world can, for the soul, be a step toward a much greater inner strength. When a person learns to accept and integrate their shadow, when they find peace within themselves, then future relationships will no longer be shallow or false. They will be real and honest connections born from their true inner power. At first, it often feels painful. In a world that measures a person's value by the number of their connections, the absence of friends can look like a personal failure. But from a deeper psychological view, it is not a mistake, but a calling. The soul expresses its inner need for change in this way. It does not speak in sentences, but in symbols, events, and coincidences that force the conscious self to stop. Just as dreams send hidden messages to restore balance, life outside is also a mirror showing what we must understand. The absence of friendships can be such a signal, a reminder from the psyche that it is time to drop the masks and meet the true self. In my work with people, I have often seen that many who suffered from loneliness were not unable to maintain relationships. Their inner being was simply in a larger process. It was as if their unconscious protected them from shallow ties in order to guide them on a deeper search. This solitude was not punishment, but a form of spiritual preparation. The absence of friends can show that life demands more honesty from a person, something he has so far hidden out of fear or habit. When he can no longer keep the masks, the false connections collapse and loneliness appears. Yet within this lies the seed of the real. This process belongs to the journey of becoming whole. Whoever has no friends or feels left out often goes through a phase in which the unconscious demands that he become himself instead of an imitation of what others expect. The endless noise of social life usually drowns these voices. But when the outer world grows quiet, they speak louder. Many fear this stage because it is hard to face one's own shadow. The conscious ego, which likes to identify only with what looks bright and acceptable, resists seeing that weakness, anger, or loneliness are also part of us. Yet here lies one of the great truths of depth psychology. Only when we accept the shadow and speak with it does real change begin. Having no friends can therefore be a condition created by life itself to stop us from avoiding this needed meeting. Solitude removes the escape paths, tears away the masks, and forces us to face ourselves honestly. Pain then becomes the teacher. Every hidden feeling that rises is actually a part of our soul that wants to be noticed and healed. I have often seen in people that the darkest moment of their lives, when they felt the heavy weight of having no one near, was also the doorway to awakening. Behind every painful emotion was a symbol. Anger showed the cry for fairness. Sadness, the call for self-love. Jealousy pointed toward unused gifts, and fear showed the place of inner growth. Loneliness strips a person bare and brings him face to face with his truth. He can no longer blame the world or hide in company. He must admit that what tortures him also lives inside himself. And in this painful awareness, in the courage to face the shadow, healing begins. Like the hero of myth who must enter the dark caves and fight the dragon before finding the treasure. So the absence of friends takes us on a symbolic journey into the depths of the inner world. This dragon is nothing other than our shadow, our fears, guilt, and doubts. What looks like punishment is in reality the condition for becoming whole. For the shadow is not truly an enemy, but hidden energy. When we accept it, this energy becomes creativity, wisdom, and freedom. In this way, loneliness stops being just emptiness and becomes a fire in which the old self is burned and the new self is born. The absence of friends is not cruel fate, but a sign that it is time to make peace with oneself. The life that denies us outer company brings us to the only company we can never lose, our full self with both light and dark. Whoever walks through the desert of loneliness and faces the shadow feels that something shifts inside. This stage, painful as it seems, works like an alchemical process. What looks like loss turns into initiation. The first change happens within. Whoever has endured loneliness without running from it learns to listen to himself. He becomes the watcher of his own thoughts, feelings, and wounds. He discovers that he can stay with himself, and that inside him lies a hidden spring of creativity, intuition, and wisdom, which before was drowned by the noise of the outer world. This path is like the myth of the phoenix. After burning in the fire of loneliness and the fight with the shadow, one rises again from the ashes, not the same as before, but with deeper awareness and a stronger identity, less tied to outside approval. And in this rebirth comes the chance to build truly honest connections. The reason is clear. Before, many social ties were made out of hidden needs, empty spaces, unhealed wounds, or fear of being alone. Friendships help to fill holes, to cover the shadow, or to escape from oneself. After such a time of reflection, however, the reason for connecting changes completely. Bonds no longer come from fear or lack, but from fullness and freedom. In my work, I have often seen that after a time of solitude, people attract new kinds of relationships into their lives. They no longer search for the crowd that distracts, but for the meeting that feeds the soul. They no longer settle for surface talks, but desire connections that allow growth, share truth, and walk the path toward becoming whole. In other words, the pain of not having friends prepares the soul to find the right ones. What is striking is that this process not only changes how we deal with people, but also our relation to the world itself. Whoever has learned to be alone does not fear silence, rejection, or abandonment. He knows he can carry himself, and from this inner strength he opens with fewer masks and more honesty. It is as if such a person grows an invisible magnet. He no longer attracts out of need, but out of the truth of who he is. And this truth calls to other souls who have also walked the same path of self-knowledge. Thus, after a time of solitude, true friendships, meaningful bonds, or even love relationships often appear, marked by honesty and depth that were not possible before. Symbolically, loneliness acts like a doorway. At first it forces a descent into the hidden world, then it lets us rise again with a new, clear, and more conscious light. This light becomes the compass by which a person also chooses his companions. What once seemed like punishment shows itself as a path of learning. The absence of friends becomes an initiation that cleanses and opens the way for the new. And while this process is neither quick nor without pain, it is still one of the deepest paths to real inner freedom and to more genuine, lasting relationships. If we see human life through the lens of the unconscious, we realize that nothing ever happens without meaning, even if at first it looks meaningless. Even the experiences that bring pain, such as loneliness or long phases without close friends, carry within them a hidden purpose, a lesson the soul needs on its journey toward wholeness. The conscious ego, however, often misreads long periods of loneliness. The ego, which is used to company, comfort, and recognition, interprets it as failure, as a lack that must be instantly fixed. Yet in truth, something far deeper is taking place. It is a call from the unconscious for inner change and transformation. The psyche sometimes pulls us away from external distractions so we can finally hear the quiet voices within. Through my studies and also through the stories of patients, I have seen how loneliness works like a secret laboratory of the spirit. It is there, free from outside noise, that the most essential questions rise. Who am I really? Why do I exist? What gives my life real direction? These questions cannot be answered in the middle of a crowd or through social approval. They can only be answered in the quiet space of one's own soul. It is exactly in such phases that a new relationship with the spiritual side of life begins to take shape. A person comes to see that he is never truly alone, but accompanied by something larger, something greater, what we call the collective unconscious, the timeless archetypes. Ancient wisdom comes alive through symbols, dreams, and synchronicities. It is as though when one outer door shuts, another inner door opens, a doorway that leads inward to the eternal. The soul requires silence in order to awaken. Without silence, there can be no deep listening. Without deep listening, there is no revelation. What at first seems like empty space is in truth a sacred ground preparing us for the divine. This is why it is no accident that solitude has always been necessary in every spiritual tradition. Prophets, mystics, and seekers all went through long desert times, retreats into mountains, or long periods of silence. They understood that only when noise disappears can the deepest truth show itself. In this way, the absence of friends can be seen as an initiatory journey, a symbol that the soul is being invited to look past the surface of life. Whoever learns to carry himself in solitude, whoever discovers inner richness without needing external company, becomes free from dependence on the outside world to feel whole. Such a person finds his center in the bond with the eternal, with what we may call God, the self, or the wholeness of the psyche. And what is most striking is this. This contact with the spiritual does not arrive as dogma, theory, or belief from outside, but shows itself in living experience, in a dream filled with archetypal images, in a sudden encounter that lights the way, or in an inner sense of companionship even in the darkest moments. A human being then realizes that within him there is something that does not die, something unbroken, something unshakable despite losses and absences. In this way, solitude becomes a teacher of the spirit. It strips away what is unnecessary, confronts us with our weakness, and at the same time joins us with a strength that goes beyond human limits. The ego may resist and suffer, but the soul knows this is preparation for a life that is more authentic, more conscious, and more deeply connected to the sacred that lives in every soul. From my own life, I have learned that what man fears most often hides exactly what he most needs. Loneliness, though rejected by the conscious mind, is one of these mysteries. Many run away from it, diving into distractions, shallow attachments, or constant external noise so they do not have to hear the voice inside. But those who are left without friends, or who are removed by fate from social circles, stand at a threshold, the threshold of their own transformation. Loneliness is not a punishment, it is initiation. The quiet ritual that the psyche designs for those who must find their truest self. Only one who dares to remain alone with himself discovers the depth of his own soul. Individuation, the central work of my thought, never happens in the crowd but in inner gathering. It is the long journey toward wholeness where we slowly learn to bring together the opposites of our psyche, the shadow and the light, the feminine and the masculine, the conscious and the unconscious. When outer life takes away friendships, it gives you instead the chance to cultivate the most important friendship of all, the friendship with yourself. And no relationship is more necessary than this one, for out of it grows the true ability to love and to live in relationships without dependence, without manipulation, and without submission. Whoever has met himself in loneliness will not later seek completion through others, but will share with others from his inner fullness. Loneliness teaches us that real freedom is not about being able to do anything we want, but about being able to be who we truly are, without masks, without roles. It frees us from the chains of what others might say, from the fear of rejection, and from the need to always please. In this wide, empty space without outer company, we begin to see that life can still be filled with meaning. The moment we stop searching outside for what can only be discovered within, in that deepest truth, solitude opens the doorway into eternity. There, where the noise of the world finally quiets down, the self begins to whisper, that inner center which ties us to the divine, and we realize that we were never really alone at all. There was always something greater, a meaning that carries us and guides us even when we cannot fully understand it. So having no friends does not mean being condemned to sadness, but rather standing at the edge of awakening. It means your life is calling you to walk through the dark night so that you may find the light inside yourself. That light is your truth, your essence, your purpose. In this way, loneliness no longer remains a heavy burden, but turns into a rare gift. The gift of knowing yourself, of changing, of being renewed. Whoever comes to this insight understands that what once looked like absence was in fact a deeper presence, the presence of your very own self.